My prevailing theory that's getting strengthened, I think, by this discussion is that something that OFMD fans have in common is that we have some form of family trauma.
Yeah.
Because it's such a strong theme in the show, I think, and connects very closely with the themes of found family and finding yourself.
Hello and welcome. Welcome back to Our Flag Means Fanfiction. We are happy to be here in your ears. And today we are going to be discussing parenting and all the ways this theme shows up in Our Flag Means Death and is also interpreted in fanfiction about the show. On the pod this week, we have Belle, who is an eldest child. So they've been parenting since they were about 6. Say hi, Belle.
Hello.
We also have Judy, who is not a cool mom. Say hi, Judy.
Hi, from Mexico.
We also have Chloe, who has excessive baggage about parents and children.
Hello.
Joining us for the first time, Lo, mom of a tiny wannabe pirate.
Hi.
And I am Andrea, your host once again, a very lonely only child. Let's kick things off with our same question we always do. Whoever wants to go first can go first. I'll let you self-select. What is the most gay pirate thing that happened to you this week?
I mean, I could cop out and say the most gay or queer pirate thing that happened to me this week is me, because I am a pirate at various Ren fairs on the weekend. But if I don't want to cop out, I was at the main Ren fair this past weekend, and they announced all of a sudden, we have too much mead, so we're giving away free bottles of mead with every purchase. So I went and I bought a bottle of water and got a bottle of alcohol.
Nice.
I do love mead. I mean, I don't drink anymore, but when I did.
That's such a good problem to have, too.
Although at Renfest, bottles of water are like $6, so you know.
The most gay pirate thing that happened to me, and I hate to bring it up again, but I am on vacation and I am looking at the Caribbean Sea, which we all know that the pirates sailed on. And
nice.
Today, as I was sitting at the pool, out of the mist comes a pirate ship. A literal pirate
No
ship.
way.
And my husband goes, why did you make a pirate ship?
You manifested it.
And all my children and my husband are rolling their eyes at me like I made the pirate ship come.
When I went to Puerto Rico last year with my girlfriend, when I was on the Caribbean Sea side, I took in a little vial, took some water from the Caribbean Sea because it was meaningful to me because of the pirates.
What a good idea.
There you go. Then I also took a tiny vial of water from the ocean in Aotearoa when I was visiting. So I've got the Caribbean. Yep.
I'm stealing that.
Because last weekend I went to a mountain biking festival for women and underrepresented genders in mountain biking. And we did this group ride one of the evenings that was like fairy tale forest themed. So everyone dressed in like fairy costumes, and some people turned their bike helmets into like mushroom caps. It was really cute. And we biked out to this like point of land that went like jutted out into a lake. And I was, of course, like, the water's right here. Like, I have to get in the water. So I stripped down to my underwear and sports bra and then just get in the water and swim around for a little bit. And then I get out and some of the people I'm with are like, you didn't swallow any of the water, did you? And it's like, I don't think so. Why? Me too. And they said, oh, well, there's like a bunch of algae blooms and some people got like really bad diarrhea. And I was like, oh, okay, well, hopefully it's fine. But I was fine. It was worth it. I haven't been in the water this whole summer, so I had to get out there.
I guess it's my turn. This Sim Fandom is the first time that I actually took to making my own costumes. If anybody's seen my cosplay, it's very lazy, but I still like made it, you know? And I don't own a sewing machine, so I had borrowed my mother's. And I just had it because my mother rarely, if ever, uses her sewing machine. Well, I get a phone call from my father last week, which was my first red flag because my father rarely ever calls me. Not that he doesn't like to talk, but he has some hearing issues. So, he tries not to stay on the phone. And he says, your mom needs the sewing machine. And I said, yeah, of course. Whenever you have some time, come and get it. He's like, we're going to get it immediately. And I went, oh. So I knew that was my mother's favorite child, which, spoilers, is not me, must have asked for something to be done immediately. And that's why she needed the machine immediately. So I look at the clock. I see there's about 3 o'clock. I'm like, well, they're not coming tonight because it's like dead traffic at this time until like 8 o'clock at night. But so I tell my dad, yeah, of course you can come tomorrow. Just let me know so that I make sure to be here, all that good stuff. Hang up. Couple hours go by. I go out to walk Susie. And as I'm coming out the door, my parents are pulling in. So I go, did you just sit in traffic for 2 hours to come get the sewing machine right at this moment? So my suspicion is confirmed. I'm like, of course you did. At this point, my mother's getting an attitude. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is normal. Okay, sure. So now I'm feeling petty and I go, okay, well, since you sat for 2 hours, because apparently she didn't know there was traffic because she's never been to a city or our city for that matter. I go, wouldn't you come and just come around the block with me and Susie? I mean, to walk around, stretch your legs before you get back onto another 2 hours of traffic. She goes, no, we can't. We got to go. I go, okay, so I'm right. Your child wants this done immediately, so you need to get back in the car. She goes, that's not it. She goes, I know that you're running with Susie and I don't want to run, so I'm not with you. So let's break why this sentence kind of broke me. One thing, if you know anything about me for any amount of time, is I hate running with a passion. There's nothing I hate more. Not surprised she didn't know this about me, although her favorite child runs. So I'm, again, not surprised that she just thought that the world runs, right? Second, she thought I was running with my dog in like 38-degree weather. So like 92. Like, okay, so bad dog parent. Cool. Then she thought I was inviting my parents to run with me. My elderly parents. So she thought I was inviting them to come run with me. Okay. And fourth, what I was wearing. I was wearing my usual stay-at-home outfit, which is a very short dress and heels. So she thought I was a runner who wanted to take my 10-year-old dog on a run in the Texas summer, invited my octogenarian father to go with me, and my chosen ensemble was a dress and high heels. That summarizes my mother right there.
So the inevitable question is, did she actually think all of that, or was that her like rationale to not stick around? Okay. All right. Okay. Just so we're clear.
So I was like, just get in the car and leave. Just get out. And that's my gay pirate story about parents.
It's beautiful, full of intrigue, trauma, drama. Did you find out, was she in fact making something for her favorite child?
Yes. My favorite child did something and it had to be done immediately with them sitting in traffic for 4 hours to fetch the sewing machine.
Well, how wonderfully camp. Well, for my gay pirate story, not really a story, just I haven't been on an episode in a while. And so my life update is that I am no longer married to a man. And now dating a woman, and that's way better. And I will not be dating any more men. So yay!
That is pretty gay. It's pretty gay.
And
that sounds like a good plan, though.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a very good plan. I'm very pleased at this time. But yeah, so let's discuss parenting. What stood out to you about the themes of parenting in the show? And I guess relatedly, because we're coming in, some of us are parents, some of us are not. But how does your experience of either being a parent or having been parented affect your interpretations?
What affected me about the story with Stede leaving his family is that he left his children, and historically, actually, they were all under the age of 5 or 6 when he left. And my kid is 5, and no matter how bad things get, I can't imagine ever leaving her for anything. So, I mean, it's kind of like, to me, it's how absolutely miserable was he that he was willing to leave? And he obviously loves his kids. How absolutely miserable does he have to be in order to leave his children behind like that?
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think it really reflects a sort of level of desperation where he was at in his life, that it got to a point where it sort of wasn't even really much of a choice anymore. It was like, either I leave and go try to be a pirate, or sort of everything that makes me who I am will just sort of wither and die here in this life I'm in. So yeah, I think he had to have been pretty miserable, and I think that really informs him a lot as a character.
I think it's very funny because the real Stede Bonnet, when he left, his friends told everyone that he had a madness in the mind because he had discomfort in a married state. And I can imagine how that would just go on to being a parent of, he actually had 4 children, would make him super crazy. because those of us who have children already feel crazy. So I'm sure I'm lucky.
God, yes.
Yeah, I'm lucky I have a good marriage, but imagine you're uncomfortable in your marriage, you're unhappy, you have 4 kids. That would definitely give you discomfort, I would say.
One of those children actually died suddenly. And there was a school of thought that he was actually so devastated that set him off. And that's why he left the entire family. He couldn't handle losing his kid. I forget which one it was. I think it might have been, he had Steve Jr., he had Mary Alambi, and I forget the last one's name. I forget which one died, but they died suddenly. And he
Edward.
apparently, the story goes, Edward? But apparently the story goes that he couldn't handle it, and that's what set him off to leave.
That's interesting. I never heard that.
Yeah, I never heard that. That is
a
good reason they wouldn't put it in the show. That's a big bummer. But that provides an interesting context to the historical Stede Bonnet anyway.
Yeah, for the show Stede Bonnet, that discomfort in a married state, and especially having kids, was probably like really exacerbated by it being like this compet situation that he never really wanted, and then being in this kind of like impossible situation, what I feel like would be an impossible situation of having kids that you have a responsibility for, but that also are like a huge part of what's trapping you in a life that you don't want to be living.
I mean, and there are many different ways of interpreting things as well. So, of course, this is David Jenkins. So we're talking about modernity within a historical context. So it's kind of that do we want to look at it from a modern perspective, where we always think, hey, mom and dad should love their children. It's their responsibility. They feel like they need to provide for them, et cetera, et cetera. Or do we go into the more historical, which is if you had a lot of money, odds are you weren't seeing your children very much at all. They were being raised by nannies, they were being sent to I want to say sleepaway camp, but no, like outside school, so you weren't even
boarding school.
So there's a little bit of this and that in there. How much do we want to go in terms of how much he loves his children? We see him play with them. We do see him feel guilty for having abandoned Mary and them. And other than that, I think he mentions his children once in season 2. So
yeah, 2 screwed up kids. Probably.
So how much is the show laying at his feet that he's really, really, really just torn apart by this? And how much is more of, I should be feeling these things because that's what a parent is told that's what you should feel. Even if maybe all you feel is relief. And maybe you think, especially after you went back, he goes, oh, these kids are doing fine. They don't need it.
So yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. One, I do think that I've got 2 messed up kids probably line is really funny. And it's a good level of self-awareness and reflection. Like, yeah, they're probably messed up. I did see a post on Blue Sky. Go ahead, Lau.
I honestly, when I first heard that line, I thought 2 messed up kids, probably. And I my dumb brain interpreted it as, I've got 2 messed up kids. I think there are 2.
That was actually the post I was going to reference. So that must have been yours.
So I'm not alone.
Because I thought that maybe it was your post, but I thought that was very funny. I always assumed, it meant he assumes they're messed up.
Yeah. Oh, I got that later.
That is very funny.
Yeah, my first initial brain was,
he's just like, I don't know how many kids I have. But the other thing I was going to say, though, is that I do think there's sort of more between the lines that he was pretty torn up about leaving his kids and Mary as well, and had a lot of guilt about that. I mean, obviously, we know that from his therapy session with the elder in episode 3. But I didn't really put this together before until I saw another post on Blue Sky, which I should credit, but I don't remember who said it off the top of my head. He has this therapy session with a tribal elder that tells him he has to resolve this guilt he's having. And he thinks it's this guilt about killing Nigel, but it's actually this guilt about leaving his children and leaving his family. And until he resolves that, it will continue to haunt him. And then he does finally resolve it at the end of season 1 and kind of has closure with and sees that they're actually better off without him, which is probably also a psychologically complicated thing to experience, that they're better off without you. That'd be hard to process too.
I've always had a sort of different interpretation, I think, than a lot of people, in that, like, I appreciate that he left if he was not going to be a good parent. And that is me projecting my own shit. But, my dad is never going to hear this, so it's fine. My dad is a musician. My mom left him when I was like 2 because he was a musician. He was out every night. Like, he wasn't being a parent, and he has popped in and out of my life ever since. And it's very exhausting. He's a very exhausting person. I have a lot of weird shit because of that. And I can't help but wonder, would my life be better if he had just done a little pulled a Stede bonnet, popped up once, been like, hey, listen, sorry it didn't work out. I'm sure you're going to be fine. I'll never see you again. Would my life have been better? Potentially. So when I watch the show, I always sort of look at Stede as making maybe not the right choice for his children, but a choice for his children that is valid. A lot of people choose not to read it that way, and they read it differently. But for me, I'm like, yeah, that is something that can be done if you are really, like, people enter into parenthood unprepared all the time. And maybe it's better to just be like, I'm actually not cut out for this, and I'm going to do you more harm if I stick around. So I'm going to go. So that's something I've always enjoyed about the show. And even though there's a part of me that is projecting my dad onto Stede, my dad, a man I don't like, I still very much like Stede. So it's almost been like a positive version of what could have been for me. Sorry, everyone, for the therapy session.
No, and actually, I think you have a very good point.
I think it's such a fascinating perspective, and I'm pretty sympathetic to it, more from the perspective of kind of like sympathy to the parent in that situation, because my experience is I'm not a parent, so I can't really speak to that, and maybe I'd have a different experience if I was a parent. But some of the experiences I've had in my life and observations from my perspective are parents who the role of parent, like, totally consumes their life and their identity, and sort of by necessity really, like, takes everything. And I don't think that is healthy and good, and especially if it's not like a situation that you necessarily wanted or signed up for example, in a compat situation like Stede's. I really do think, like I was saying in the beginning, that he was like pretty at risk of sort of just completely like withering away and dying as a person in his situation. And I do think that it was the right thing for him to do, to leave. And my perspective on that, again, is like primarily from like the parent, but I also think there's an argument to be made that is like the best option for the kids, as Andrea was getting at, because it's kind of like what people talk about when there's a couple who like might get divorced and they have kids, and it's like, oh, we should stay together for the kids. Well, it's like, well, what is more damaging, having your parents separate or having your parents stay together, but it's always like fraught, and then you as the kid internalize a lot of that and feel like you're ruining their life. And I feel like if Stede also would have stayed, his kids probably would have been messed up in another way, because they would have eventually picked up on how miserable he was and probably felt some degree of responsibility for that. So it's not like a great situation no matter what, but it's kind of like what does the least damage here and optimizes the most people's happiness. And I think him leaving did, both for his sake and for his kid's sake, as Andrea was pointing out.
So actually, one of the things I like about the show is that we don't get a resolution exactly of whether the kids are like so much better off without him, or we don't like go back and check on them and, oh my God, they're thriving. Oh no, they feel terrible. And Alma has kind of a mixed reaction. She's upset, but then she also takes the orange and all kinds of things. Because the thing about it is, when you're a parent, you do things, and hopefully you do the best thing that you think is going to help your child the most. But there is no telling what your actions are going to do. So yes, maybe him living was fantastic for the kids. Maybe traumatized them forever. Maybe him staying would have been horrible for them. Maybe it would have been like, there is no telling. And that's how it feels to be a parent. You're like, here, I'm doing this thing. And let's just hope that this doesn't turn into major trauma.
So you're going to mess up your kids no matter what, is what you're saying.
You might as well mess them up in the ways you want them to be messed up.
Hopefully you're breaking some generation trauma. Hopefully you're doing better than your parents. But like that, you just don't know. You just don't know. And when we've talked about this in some of the episodes about Taika, is that when you're a kid, your whole life is the adults around you, whether it's your parents or whoever your caretakers are. So you may be doing something that you thought completely innocuous. Oh, no, but I can't pronounce that word. Like completely just neutral. Maybe you were tired and you screamed, or maybe you were wearing something nice and you tell them not to touch you because of something. Like you can do something completely that just goes over your head. And to them, it's the world, right? It's just huge because you're their world. So again, you do your best. On the positive side, and we give Stede, of course, credit for being a good person. So as a good person, you do your best, but how it's going to turn out, who knows? And I think I like that the show kind of goes with that idea of like, well, there it is. We don't know what ended up happening with the kids. There's no neat, tidy, like, and they thrived storyline.
I think that it was pretty interesting the way they did have the children's reactions, because you could tell Alma was upset and resented him. And, our king, Lewis, who had to make the comment of, who are you again? When he clearly knows that's his father, but, he's
I thought Doug was my father.
Yeah, total.
Savage.
Passive aggressive 7-year-old in the whole world. And he's just digging it at Stede. And I think that's funny because, Stede thinks he's wonderful because now he's back, and one resents him and one's being rude to him. And I like that response.
You know where both of his children got their bitchiness from.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, Belle, I interrupted you.
No, I said anybody who's ever had a child or had been around a child has heard that tone coming from their children.
Yes.
Spot on. It was just
so much. And mine's only 5.
One of my nieces was 5 when she turned to her mother and said, "You don't know me. You don't know my life." So the attitude is one of the first things that develops in personality.
My daughter was 2, and she told us that I do what I want. 2 years old. I do what I want.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's the epic. Fine.
Yeah. It's another bit in this show where those kids get like 4 lines each, maybe, and yet packed full of development.
So much
lines.
So much. It's so good.
So much about them, and they're children, and they've got a handful of actual speaking bits. So again, the show's just incredible that way.
So I'm gonna, we've all talked a little bit about our personal experiences and how it's influenced, the way we interpret the way that the show approaches parenting. But what do you, and we kind of talked about this, but more specifically, like, what do you agree with and what do you not agree with? And I think we can expand outside of Stede as well, right? Because there's how trauma impacts you from your childhood, looking at Ed. There's, again, these implied backstories of the other characters. So what about, what resonates with you? And you're like, yeah, the show really got that right. And what is like, ooh, I don't know. I wouldn't do that if I were to, write this myself. Not that we would change the show because we love it, but you know what I mean.
So I'll say this. I think of all the parents in the show that you see, the one that for some reason hit me in the chest hard is when I thought, wow, that's damaging, was Ed's mom.
Yeah.
Because I think when you have just outright abuse, it's a lot easier. I mean, it's also very damaging, don't get me wrong, extremely so. And it can cause all kinds of issues. But it does make it easier to kind of go like, that's a bad person. That is not a person that has my best interest at heart. That's not a person that I want to imitate. It's a lot easier to distance like that. When it's a parent who with kindness is telling you that God says you're inferior to other people, that can be so damaging. And it's insidious because you love that parent. And again, they're being kind. They're not hitting you. They're not screaming at you, but they're just eroding the sense of you. And if you other than him actually killing his dad, which seems to me like a very good response to that a-hole, that's what you see affecting Ed the most, especially season 1. It's that we're inferior and that's how it's meant to be. And that's just how it's mandated. And you see a lot of that in fics as well, where people explore this whole, I'm not worthy. This is just not, I'm not worthy of Stede. I'm not worthy of Izzy. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not all of that. So that's the one that hit me in the chest the hardest. Stede's dad also, major asshole. Same thing. You're just vile. I hope you die. I hope your death was very, very painful. Just, forget you. But Ed's mom really hit me.
I think I think part of the worst part of the whole thing with Ed's mother is how well-meaning it was. It's the instinct to try to protect your child against, disappointment and stuff like that. But it's so well-meaning, but it was so bad for him. It's, that kind of hit me a little bit too. And it also strikes me that if Ed had ever had children, he would have been one of those parents that he would be so scared of being his parents that he would let his kids get away with absolute murder, because he's like, oh, I don't want to be my dad. So you stole this kid's lunch. Oh, it's probably you didn't like what I made you. Okay, I'll make you something different that time. He would just let his kids get away with everything.
Well, the one time we see Ed interact with kids in the show, he's like, here's some knives, here's a bunch of money, don't be a pirate.
Oh yeah, and you don't want to stab, you want to slash to make sure they're dead.
Yeah. I think that's such an interesting point, Belle, about Ed's mom, and totally true, because it's really damaging messaging, even if it comes from a place of love, and that really did stick with him. And it's interesting, though, to see in fics when Ed's mom is a character or referenced, it's usually from what I've seen, in a positive, loving way, and that they have a good relationship or had a good relationship. And I don't know that I have seen fics that have touched on Ed's issues from the messaging he got from his mom. Indirectly, yes, where he's struggling with a sense of worthiness, but not in a way that directly explores his relationship with his mom.
Yeah, that's great.
So I'd be really interested if those are out there.
That's true. I haven't seen that either. And I will say that there are two things that I see a lot in fics. So one is they had a good relationship, they have a good relationship, they love each other. And then the other one is his mom was horrified when he killed his dad, and that was the end of that relationship. So those are usually the two themes that I see a lot in fics.
Yeah.
I don't want to self-rec, but you should read mine then, because I have not a whole lot, but there's definitely some of what Chloe was just talking about. Not to push my own story, but
definitely push your own fics.
Yeah, please do.
I could,
yeah.
So you can too.
Yeah, Chloe, you if you are interested in that, or Belle, or any of you, you should read mine, although I'm still working on it, of course, because I do touch upon how, and I'll just say that Ed's mother loved him, but she was too busy to give him attention. She was always working. And, there's one line that I wrote, which is probably a reflection of my own life, but that any love she had for him was an afterthought. So she had it, but she was too busy with her own problems in life and money and trying to support her child. And that's kind of how, I feel the situation was that she was so busy and poor and an abusive husband that she didn't have the time or wherewithal to really parent this child. She was allowing her son to live in an abusive situation, which of course we all know, in fact, what are women going to do? Especially at that time, they're going to be stuck with this horrible abusive husband. But in retrospect, she was allowing her son to witness the abuse, to be abused. So I don't think his mother is, the golden goddess that a lot of people portray her as.
That's really interesting. I mean, I have had that same thought, but I don't think I really let it formulate all the way until you said it, Belle, and then everyone else, adding on. But yeah, she did do a lot of harm, and it's obviously not the same overt harm, but it's still harm. And in my own fic that no one will ever read because it's mine and it's secret. But in my own fic, I did a little bit of backstory with the Ed's mom's character. And now that I think about it, yeah, I did write her as someone who contributed to his trauma, not on purpose, but just because she didn't have the strength to do any better. And I think that is, even again, she has 3 lines, and we can still extrapolate this entire relationship that they had, and that how she impacts him.
And also it's a matter of a contrast. So even if Ed's mom was, in fact, like you said, Judy, just too tired to deal and just trying her best to just keep her head above water, and everything else was like secondary. You have that compared to the actual like abusive, physically abusive, mentally just awful man. So then that becomes a good parent, even if that's not what she wasn't the best parent, even if left something a lot to be desired. So then that will probably make him cling even more, which makes any of the damage even stronger.
I agree, Belle. And I think that when you have one parent who's absolutely horrific, you're going to tend to, make the parent who's not as bad like Saint did, because even though they're maybe doing the minimum, it's still more than the other parent. And again, I'm reflecting in my own life because my mother was and is pretty horrible. And I always thought my dad was the greatest man on earth. And then I started to be around 40 and I started to realize maybe not.
Yeah, that's absolutely my experience as well. And not only did I cling to my dad, but also before we moved, my immediate family as well. So like my uncles, my grandfather, etc., and my grandma. Yeah, like you said, they're saints. And then you grow up and you go, okay, maybe not saints, but the contrast made them seem that way, especially when you're a child and you don't know any better.
My prevailing theory that's getting strengthened, I think, by this discussion is that something that OFMD fans have in common is that we have some form of family trauma.
Yeah.
Because it's such a strong theme in the show, I think, and connects very closely with the themes of found family and finding yourself in a place you feel safe with and people you feel safe with.
I know FMD even touches on the theme of outgrowing your found family with Izzy and Ed.
It sure does.
So it just has all these levels. Again, in 18 flipping episodes, it's got all of these levels of intricacy. And yeah, you're right. And I'm a child of the 90s. So I grew up in the 90s, and we were bombarded with sitcoms about perfect families, even if they were unusual families, like say the one with the kids in San Francisco, I forget the name now, where it was like the dad alone, then some adults were being his two friends to help with his kids.
Full House.
Full House. Okay. So even then, the idea is the parents have time, the parents cook, the parents, solve their kids' problem. They sit down and do homework with them. There is no expectation of parenting from the other children. Everybody's allowed to have their own, and that was everywhere. That's why when Roseanne came out, it was like revolutionary, because it's like, what do you mean you're showing a family on screen that's not perfect? And the mom is upset and the dad is sarcastic and the children are messed up. So, and I see it in my generation, a lot of people who that's the standard that they're holding themselves up to, which is an insane standard. Nobody can do that. Nobody can have a full-time job and raise a multitude of children. And it's just not possible.
I think we also have in our fandom is that I think a lot of us feel like people love us in spite of our faults, where with your family, it almost seems like your family loves you because they have to. You can go on, here or Discord and say like, oh, I'm bipolar, and people don't go, oh, they say, oh, I'm bipolar too, or I, feel this or way about you. So you feel like all of, the people that we know in the crew, they love you in spite of being bipolar or whatever the case may be. And I think a lot of us don't feel that with our families. And I think they saw that in the show that, Stede is bitchy, but the crew still loves him. And I think a lot of us don't have that experience in our own, genetic biological families.
Yeah, and Izzy as well, like everybody pretty much. But that's another thing we kept talking about. It keeps coming back, the idea of love as a choice versus love as obligation, or love as whatever, the stars, or things like that. So when you make a choice, when you choose to love somebody, it is so much stronger. And that's what we find as a crew, rather than, well, I gave birth to you. Or another toxic thing that happens a lot is you have to love me because I'm your parent, or you have to love your siblings because they're your siblings, or your cousin, or whatever. That you people share DNA, so you have to love them. which is extremely toxic and extremely difficult.
I have a real sister, a sibling, and it's funny because my best friend and I, who she also has a sister, we call each other chosen sisters because we're more sisters to each other than we are to our own sisters.
Yeah, as I mentioned in my intro, I'm a lonely only child. So my friends are incredibly, they are my family, and I will force myself upon them as such because I don't have that elsewhere. And so seeing that reflected in the show is very important and an important reminder of the importance of having that for yourself, finding that for yourself. And I think, yes, the fandom has a lot of parental or family trauma in common, but I think all humans have that in common. I think there's very few of us out there in the world who had healthy upbringings for, any variety of reason. It's an easy theme, I think, to write about, but it is not an easy theme to approach in the way that this show did. And I think that's really what's so captivating about it is, this whole discussion we just had about Ed's mom. I think in other shows, Ed's mom would be an angel, right? But in this show, we see that, no, she caused him harm. And it's something that we all picked up on, whether super overtly or less so, we still all picked up on it. And again, the whole discussion we had about Stede and leaving his children, like they portray Stede as a good man who abandoned his family. That's a crazy statement when you think about it. And I don't know any other show that's ever done that or is even attempting to do that. So it's really taking these complex ideas that every human can relate to and showing it's not that simple. Sometimes the person who leaves is not always the bad guy. And sometimes the person who doesn't hit you isn't always the good guy. Like it's not that simple. And I think the show is really, really beautiful about that.
Yeah, I think that also to me, found family is really important because I'm actually an adopted child. So I don't have the genetic attachment. So for me, blood relations means absolutely nothing. Family is what you make of it. And found family in particular, and I'm very close with my found family. I'm reasonably close with my, related family too. But I think also the addition of the fact that there is no blood tie, blood ties don't mean anything to me. It's all, it's the family. Family means love. And as long as there's love, that is family. And so family of any kind, found family, whatever, that's always been very important to me. And I think the show, kind of portrays that it's the family is where love is. And, to the point that, Stede's old family has their own love and now they're family. And, hopefully that works out good for them. And, I think it proved that, he was a little bit of an outsider of the family. He loved them, but it wasn't the right type of love to be a good family. And he went off and he found the right type of love to be that family for him. Yeah, and I think that's really great.
He takes on that father role with the crew and they really need it. And he's really good at it. And obviously there's missteps and sometimes they hate him. But generally speaking, that's a good role for him to fall into and is healing for him, really. And healing, and then his kids, we didn't really mention Doug too much, but then his kids get Doug. And, as far as we know, Doug is great, but for the purpose, go ahead.
Oh no, that was just Mary's line. He's the best.
Yes, he does seem like the best. He seems very sweet. But for the purpose of moving things along, because we talked a lot, which is awesome, I want to shift into fan fiction specifically and ask the question, because I see this over and 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 over again: is fan fiction turning Stede into a good dad? Into a dad that shows up, into a dad who calls, and especially in AU, right? He calls, he texts, he FaceTimes, he Zooms. I see that in every fic I read. What are our thoughts about this?
I actually have read, I don't say quite a few, but I've definitely read some where Stede is not the best dad. I was just thinking of one and I can't remember whose it was, but in the story, he's like, oh, I know Lewis is not my kid. Like he straight up thinks Lewis is Doug's kid, and I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but I remember reading that one and saying like, yeah, he kind of is a dick about his kids. And it was, kind of nice to see something more along what we're not used to seeing, that he's not this great dad. But in retrospect, if it's an AU and he did have access to Zoom and phone calls, and maybe he would have been a better dad, because what are you going to do back in that day? You're just going to split. You're going to write a letter to your kid. I mean, that's what else you're going to do. You're not going to, although most of the time the men took the kids if they left the wives legally. They were legally, the children were owned by the father, but we're not talking about reality here.
It's the school of historical accuracy. So I see a lot. So I see, yes, Stede becomes, even in period accurate fics, there's somewhere Stede keeps circling back to Barbados every once in a while to check on his kids, and maybe Mary and Doug go off on holiday and leave the kids with Stede, and usually it's to get either Ed to be a really good dad or Izzy to be a really good uncle / whatever they want to call him. And I mean, everybody takes it the way they want to take it. I think very few people are willing to put that Ed or Stede in the he's just not a good dad category, because it's into our heads that makes a good person, that a good person would be a good parent, which we just talked about is not necessarily the truth. And in fact, it may take a very big person to realize that they're not. And a lot of the fics that I've read with those kinds of themes where they admit that Stede's not a good dad, they also talk about obligation. So Stede doing anything and everything to please his dad. And some of that is done because dad has all the money. So what do we do with that money? Some of it is just because I want my dad's love. Some make Stede's mom non-existent. Some make Stede's mom be just as bad as the dad. Some make Stede's mom be a nice person. It's just kind of all over the place. But I think everybody, we're talking about, everybody looks at it from their own perspective, what their experience was, and kind of injects it, or what they've seen and kind of injects it into Stede. I think it's perfectly fine if Stede goes, it's just not for me. Rarely is it shown that he chooses to have children and he's like, yeah, absolutely, I was dying to have a child, and oops, turns out I don't like it, which I think is also very valid, especially based on the time period of the show. You were just expected to have children. People die so fast that you're like, no, you have to reproduce and keep them going. So you had no choice. And it just, it's never a good thing to just have children to have them.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know why every fic, I feel like every fic I've read, and I've never come across one where Stede isn't portrayed as this great dad, whether it's AU or even if it's, canon or whatever, and I'm like, what is going on with every other person on this planet that they want to rewrite this character that was not written this way, and I think is valid as he is. It is, listen, I love fan fiction. I love all the stories that I've read, kudos to the authors, but it is something that really sticks in my craw, so to speak, that it seems like there is a general consensus, at least in all the fanfics I've come across. And granted, I'm not the most prolific reader. I do spend a lot of time watching reality TV. That takes a lot of my time. However, that there is just this desire, and I understand, because for, again, almost everyone in the fandom / the world has trauma. Oftentimes it's related to fathers. So you want to rewrite something that perhaps feels healing to you. And I do get that, but I think it does a bit of a disservice to what the creators of the show and the writers of the show built around Stede, and saying it's okay, he can still be a good person and not be a present parent, and flipping that around, for your own purposes. I get it, but I also am kind of like, but what about what we saw? Can we hear that more of that story? So I guess friends here and listening, send me fics where Stede is not a good dad, because somehow I never come across them.
I'll call my bookmarks and send you some stuff, but yeah, we're just making him even nicer or better than he's portrayed.
We have the same thing though concerning stepdad Ed. Every fic has this amazing stepdad Ed. And I remember it was the unauthorized biography of Ed and Stede, and I specifically remember it because I podficked it, that Yerba Masa made it so that Ed wasn't a bad stepdad, but he wasn't all that interested because he's 50 years old. He's never been around kids.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I hadn't thought of it, but you're right. The flip side to Stede being a good dad is that also Ed is a super willing stepdad. And I'm like, are you sure? Have you met him? I don't know. I don't know about that.
I have read a few where he kind of goes, what am I going to do? Because I know that my dad was a dick and I probably have it in me to be a dick kind of thing, and he questions his ability to interact with Steve's children. But again, they make it seem like he's really trying and he's just stressing about it because he really, really, really wants to be a good stepdad. There's some fic writers, of course, who neatly sidestep the problem by disappearing the children, no children involved, making the children like cats or dogs or just, something else that just not quite, that, okay, maybe Steve leads the dogs to marry. It's A-okay. So that's another way of making sure that you don't make Steve quite as complicated a character. Again, with the idea that you have to be a good parent to be a good person, which I think is toxic, and that everybody wants to be a good parent, which I think is toxic. But especially if you're an AFAB and you have had the loveliness of having somebody ask you constantly if you're going to have children, where you're going to have children, how many children you have, how come you haven't had children, all that stuff in you constantly. And then you probably have felt that kind of frustration of, if you say, I don't want children, people look at you like you just said, I murder kittens for a living, So
do you also get the opposite response where, like, I've often said, like, I love my kids. I would die for my kids. I do not regret having my kids. But in a different world, maybe, I wouldn't have had kids and I would have had money and I would have been able to travel because children are so expensive. And I have friends who have no children and they're the most amazing aunties and uncles and they love it. And then they leave.
I even get a lot of flack because I've only got one. And I only ever wanted one. And they're like, you don't want to have more? I'm like, no, the one is traumatizing enough. My sister's got 3 kids. She's got 3 boys. She's got twins and a 13-year-old. And just watching her, I'm like, I just get exhausted being on the phone with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And that idea, of course, that you have more children for your other children, like when you get another dog so that your dog has somebody to play with, and you're like, is that a good reason to have another human being come into the world?
I know, right?
But you also get the opposite. I have 3 kids. And when I had my first 2, they were only 10 months apart. I had a boy and a girl. And when I had my third, and trust me, I never wanted any kids, yet I have 3. And it's just funny because people would be like, you're pregnant again?
Basically there's no writing answer. No matter what you do, someone's mad at you.
Yep. That was my takeaway too. No matter what you do, people are going to judge you. And no matter what you do, your kids are going to be messed up. So just do what you want and do your best.
And it also brings up the fact that people feel like usually, especially AFABs, and of course, any trans person has ever, people think that they have the right to ask you and opine and say very invasive things and get upset at you when you are like, let's not talk about this personal thing, shall we? Yeah, like, why is everything that's happening here any of your business, any of your concern, and why are you asking me? And yeah,
my husband would say to people when they'd say, you're having a third, and he'd say, well, I'm not asking you to raise them.
Yeah,
that generally shut them up.
Could I bring up the idea of feeling the need to please and make your parents happy? Because that's another thing that you see in fics a lot, again, of Stede, especially Stede, just going, I want my dad to love me at some point. And just spending his whole life trying to do it and failing miserably no matter what he does. And that moment of realization of, why am I spending my whole life trying to please a person that will never be pleased?
Yeah, I think parental expectations comes up a couple times in the show between Stede and Ed and Jim as well, with Nana, with the whole, and Jim broke the cycle. It's revenge is cool, but I'm good. Sorry, Nana. And I think that it was significant that Jim, broke apart from the parental expectation. Yes, you must get revenge. You must hunt them all down. And they're like, yeah, no, you know what? I did I did what I set out to do. I killed the actual guy that killed him, and I'm good. I don't need to do it anymore. I'm good where I am. And Stede and Ed, to quite a bit of the extent, like they just seemingly are trying to get out from under their parental expectations for a good deal of the series. Stede keeps hearing his dad in his head, and so does Ed, and they spend a lot of time trying to get out from under those expectations. And then there's Jim, who actually did it.
I love that Jackie is the one who got through to Jim about you don't have to have this revenge in your heart. You don't have to do these things.
I can't believe we didn't talk about Jim before we start talking about fanfic. Like,
right.
Duh. Talk about parenting and family expectations. Like, that's the most obvious hit you over the head with, like, sometimes you don't need to live up to your family's expectations. And it's so important. It's so important that all of us human beings should be watching, at least just watch that one episode or whatever, 2 episodes, I guess, where they kind of that storyline plays out, to understand how important it is to take what you need from your how you were brought up and leave what you don't. It is not yours to take if you don't need it.
100%. I will always say that the best thing I learned to do is to be perfectly okay by the fact that my parents are disappointed in me every day. I'm like, okay, be disappointed. It's freed me so very much. And then, of course, yeah, you're right. We didn't talk about Nana at all, who's also a complicated parent figure. Very chill with Jim changing their name, starts using the correct pronouns immediately, good stuff, and then puts all this expectation on them. So complicated people. Parents are not perfect. They're never going to be, and the show shows it.
I also think not that they're so much a parent, but the Swede. Stede is kind of his leader, his faux father on the ship. He's the dad on the ship. And they kind of push him Stede pushes him to go with Jackie to make the rest of their lives a little easier. And then when he's like, come on, Swede, we're going. And he's like, well, no, I'm being with Jackie's been the happiest I've ever been in my life. So he left that family for a new adventure and new love. And I kind of see that as a parental thing, with Stede being like his boat dad.
Well, it's so funny.
I never thought about that, for swear. I love the Swede being like the picture of healthy relationships, healthy parental relationships is the Swede.
Yeah. And healthy open marriage also. He's doing great at that. But
healthy all around.
He really is the best. But I brought this up in the garlic soup episode, and I probably should re-listen to myself to remember what conclusion I came to. But one of the scenes that I still kind of struggle with that bummed me out so much is the scene where Jim and Archie are considering leaving the Revenge and leaving Daddy Stede to go join Zhang. And I thought that was, and I still am like, oh, that was such a bummer. And I need to remember someone, I forget who said something that made me feel better, and it didn't stick with me. I got to re-listen. But yes, it's another sort of parenting parallel of like, okay, well, we're leaving our dad, and Stede was so sad, and then I was sad.
I'm going through that right now with my kids. My 2 oldest kids are going to college. What am I going to do with myself? Because my son's an actor. My daughter was, captain of the ROTC. I always had so much to do, and cooking and cleaning and traveling. Am I still mom now that my kids are leaving? And they'll say to me like, oh, I can't wait to go to school. And I'm like, but you don't love me? You're leaving me? So there's the parallel in life of the same situation that Stede felt. It really kicked me in the face. I think if he had thought about it, he would not think they were being traitors, but that's how he felt at the time.
It's hard, but if you have your kids' best interests at heart, you don't want to be the person that does something like what Stede did and start fighting, and you're mine and you're trying to poach my kids or my crew. But also, poor Stede, you finally found family, and then some of them were going to leave him. So I could also see, just especially when he was been drinking, just not taking that in the healthiest possible way.
And right after Ed is like, I'm going to go be a fisherman. Yeah. Like, he's at a real low point in that moment. Just got to defend him a little bit.
So with that, let us move on to Fic Rex.
But I'm going to rec The Art of Smashing Crockery by PhantomEllie. This definitely deals with some of the themes we've been talking about Stede feeling a sense of obligation to his father, mainly about money and trying to take care of his kids. It also shows him trying to trying to be a good dad, a good husband, but that completely destroying him almost. So read the tags. It just deals a lot with him kind of wrestling with a lot of stuff that we see him wrestle with in canon, but it's a modern AU where Ed owns a rage room and Stede goes to the rage room to try to process his emotions. It's really good.
Okay. Is that the only one you have? I don't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
That's all I got.
Oh, okay.
Peace out.
I have two. There's one. It's possibly one of the saddest fics I've ever read. It's called One Day I Am Going to Grow Wings by Cream is Here. CREMEIS. HERE. Oh God, it's so incredibly sad. It's that Stede actually, they don't discuss why right away, but Stede has passed away, and it turns out that he hanged himself. And most of it is Ed dealing with the grief and not wanting to face it. But there is a sequence near the end where he starts to come out of it and he connects with Bonnet's children and he's like, I don't know how to do this, but I figure we can work through it together. And they have a picnic with marmalade. And it's a really beautiful sequence of him trying really hard to be a good stepdad. And I will warn you right now, it is traumatizingly sad, but the ending of him being a stepdad is so beautiful that I figured it belonged here.
Wow. That sounds like something I could never even begin to open. I'm going to go ahead and go on record and say, nope, that is absolutely not for me. I commend you for your bravery in reading that. Genuinely. That is wild.
Yeah, it was a rough read, but it because it had like a couple really beautiful sequences, and because also I've had issues with unresolved grief in my past, like it resonated with me, and it was so beautiful at the end that I do believe it deserves a place here. And the other one I'm going to wreck is mine, because I was assured that is not a bad thing to do here. And the fic I'm wrecking is Stowaway. Alma stows away on the ship. Izzy has faked his death and survived, and he does not want anybody to know that he's still alive. But Alma strikes up a rapport to him with his absolute irritation. And they become friends, and she ends up having to kill somebody during a raid and is traumatized by it, and he helps her through it and eventually says, okay, I will take you to your dad. I'm going to regret this so bad. And she's like, yay! And it has a happy ending. And it turns out that Alma is a really, really good sailor. Once again, to Izzy's absolute irritation. And she gets to reunite with Stede, and so does Izzy. And it has a happy ending. And I think, like, Izzy being a parent in that case, it was just a lot of fun to write, especially because Izzy really, really, really does not want a relationship with this kid, but he ends up with it. So that's my rec.
That sounds very sweet, and definitely encourage sharing of your own fics. So excellent. Belle or Judy, go ahead.
I think I mentioned it already, but I'm going to be the outlier here and go again with Yerba Mansa. The unauthorized autobiography of Ed and Stede. That was the one where I mentioned that Ed is kind of an indifferent stepdad. And I don't even think I think actually when the kids come over, he's like, I'm out. So, and I think it's a different type of Ed and Stede, becoming a full-time couple story than what a lot of people are used to. And there's not, perfect dad Stede and super stepdad Ed. So it's a little different. Lovely, really nice story. And I think people would like that one.
Yeah, that sounds really lovely.
So I will wreck because I had a hard time finding the ones that I know I've read where kind of Stede is okay being an okay dad. But there's a couple of ones where his kids feature prominently. He loves his kids, and his kids, especially Alma, have a very big to-do in getting Stede and Ed together, which I really love. So one is We Belong Awake by Such Great Heights. It's a very long one, but basically Stede and Ed kind of just running to each other, and it's Alma who gives Ed Stede's phone number, and it goes from there. And it is very based on Stede being a fantastic dad and loving his children a lot. So if you're not a fan of that, probably pass on this one. Rinse and Repeat by Yellow Mustard is another one. I've read this before. It's very, very sweet. Alma features heavily, not only as a wing person, but also as just her going through her own journey throughout the fic. It made me cry when I read it. So very, very, very sweet. And I will throw in another one, which I also read before, but it reminded me, The Slightest Touch. And I'm going to remember exactly who wrote it in just a minute, but I'll put it in the show notes. That one does feature Ed severely questioning his ability to be a good step parent given his history. So I really like that part of it.
Excellent, Rex. I'm super excited for us to share these out. I hope for folks who are doing some healing around parenting one way or another, that reading or writing some of these is helpful for you. But with that, team, opportunity here, open call. What are you working on? What are you looking forward to? Where can people find you if you want to be found?
I'm Phantom531 on AO3, and for the most part, the next place I will be is, I think, Bucks County or Connecticut Ren Fair with the booth that I work with, which is Adventures from the Wizard's Tower. We do a fair-wide role-playing game, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm a pirate.
If only I lived closer, I would be there right now.
I'm Judy's Oranges everywhere. And if you like podfics, I do those. They're not fancy with lots of special effects and whatnot. It's kind of me being Stede sitting on the deck reading a story. If you like those kind of podfics, that's what I do. I'm looking forward to my massage on Wednesday that I'm having with no children and no husband, just my little time alone on my vacation.
Ooh.
And yes, and I also look forward to doing this with you guys again, because this has been fabulous.
Yeah, me too. I always look forward to these. So that is what I'm looking forward to at the moment, and just making it through the week. It's been a rough one. And I'm still working on the same podfic that I've been working on, because it's 12 chapters long, and that's a lot of commitment from me. But I've got a couple of them recorded, and I'll be posting them soon. So thank you for all the people that have been poking me and showing me a lot of patience. I'll put on the show notes where you can find my podfics. I have an RSS feed and everything. Thanks, Goodness, for showing me how to technology. And Bella Santa Bank and all the metas. And I have a zillion names because I can never make anything. I can never stick to anything. Perilous and Wicked in Blue Sky, Tumblr. Whiskey Tango Foreigner in AO3.
And I am not very mentally present. I'm navigating divorce. So if anyone has any tips, please let me know. Username on Blue Sky, Pajarito Botones. Find me there and tell us what's going on, people out there. Do you want to get involved with this podcast? You can record a podfic. You can record an episode. You can join an episode. You can suggest a topic, whatever you want. We have a Discord you can join. So please do reach out. Let us know. You can find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Our Flag Means Fanfiction, or you can email us at ourflagmeansfanfiction@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. As we always like to remind folks, we want to show that there's still an audience for this show. We want to be able to say that the appetite is still there. We're still rabid. We're still insane. So, keep getting involved and talking about this show and all the great fan fiction that continues to come every day. New fics published every day from this show. So in any case, thank you for listening. We hope you had a good time. And if you need to talk to someone about your being a parent or being parented, please call someone, one of your friends, someone you trust, and have that conversation. Take care of yourself. And most importantly, do creations, be cringe, and commit crime. Bye.